What if I told you that a single cup of coffee could change 2 lives forever, and that sometimes the person sitting across from you in a worn coat and tired eyes might be worth more than you could ever imagine? But what they are really searching for has nothing to do with money at all. This is the story of Emma, a waitress who worked double shifts just to make ends meet, and an old man who walked into her cafe on a rainy Tuesday afternoon looking like he had nowhere else to go. She had no idea that this fragile-looking stranger was actually one of the wealthiest men in the entire city. And what happened next between them would challenge everything you think you know about kindness, wealth, and what it really means to see someone for who they truly are. Stay with me, because what unfolds in this story will make you question every assumption you have ever made about the people you pass by every single day. And trust me, you will not want to miss the moment when Emma discovers the truth about who she helped that day. Main story. The rain came down in heavy sheets that Tuesday afternoon, turning the streets of downtown into rivers of gray water and forcing everyone who had somewhere to go to rush inside seeking shelter. The cafe where Emma worked sat on a busy corner, and on days like this it became a sanctuary for cold, wet strangers looking for warmth and something hot to drink. Emma had been working there for almost 3 years now, and she knew the rhythm of the Yale place like she knew her own heartbeat. Mornings brought the business crowd in their sharp suits clutching phones and barking orders. Afternoons slowed down a bit with students camping out at tables with laptops and textbooks spread everywhere, and evenings brought couples on dates and friends catching up over dessert. Emma loved her job, even though it did not pay much, and even though her feet ached at the end of every shift, and even though some customers treated her like she was invisible. She loved it because she got to be part of people's days in small but meaningful ways. She remembered regulars and their usual orders. She noticed when someone looked sad, and she would add an extra cookie to their plate. She made sure the coffee was always fresh and the tables were always clean, because she believed that everyone who walked through that door deserved to feel welcome. On this particular rainy afternoon, Emma was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see an old man shuffle inside. He was soaked through his thin gray coat clinging to his shoulders, and water dripping from the brim of his old hat. His shoes made wet, squeaking sounds on the tile floor, and he moved slowly, like each step required great effort. Emma watched as he stood just inside the doorway, looking around the cafe with uncertain eyes, as if he was not sure he belonged there. The cafe was nearly full with people escaping the storm, and most tables were taken. The old man's gaze swept across the room, and Emma could see something in his expression that made her chest tighten. It was not just that he looked cold or wet. It was something deeper. A kind of weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. It was the look of someone who felt very alone in the world. Emma grabbed a towel from behind the counter and walked over to him with a warm smile. She had learned over the years that a smile could sometimes do more than words, especially for people who looked like they needed one. "Hello there," she said gently. "You look like you could use something warm. Let me get you a seat." The old man looked at her, and for a moment he seemed surprised, as if he had not expected anyone to notice him or care. His eyes were pale blue and deeply lined at the corners, and in them Emma saw decades of stories she would never know. "Thank you," he said quietly. His voice was rough and soft at the same time, like it had not been used much lately. Emma led him to a small table near the window where he could watch the rain. She handed him the towel, and he took it with trembling hands and dried his face and neck. "Take your time," she said. "I will be right back with a menu." When she returned, the old man was sitting, very still, staring out at the rain with an expression that Emma could not quite read. She set the menu down in front of him and waited. The cafe was loud around them with conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine and the clatter of dishes. But at their little table by the window there was a pocket of quiet. He looked at the menu for a long time, and Emma noticed his hands shaking slightly as he held it. She wondered if he was okay, if maybe he was sick or in trouble. After what felt like several minutes, he looked up at her and said, "Just a coffee, please." Black Emma nodded. "Of course, coming right up." She turned to go, but something made her pause. She looked back at him sitting there in his wet coat, looking so small and fragile, and she felt a pull in her chest that she could not ignore. "Excuse me," she said. "Would you like something to eat as well? We have fresh muffins and some really good soup today. It is cold out there and you look like you need more than just coffee." The old man's expression shifted and Emma saw something flicker across his face. Embarrassment, maybe, or shame. "I appreciate that," he said, "but just the coffee is fine." Emma studied him for a moment longer, and then she understood. He was not declining because he was not hungry. He was declining because he could not afford it. The realization hit her hard because she knew that feeling. She had been there herself not so long ago when every dollar mattered, and spending money on food felt like a luxury she could not justify. She smiled at him again this time with even more warmth. "You know what," she said, "our cook made way too much soup today, and we are going to have to throw it out if someone does not eat it. Would you be doing me a favor and help us out? It would be a shame to waste it." The old man looked at her, and Emma could see him processing her words, trying to decide if she was telling the truth or just being kind. After a moment, his eyes grew a little wet, and he nodded slowly. "That would be very kind of you," he said quietly. Emma brought him a large bowl of vegetable soup, a basket of warm bread, and the coffee he'd asked for. She set it all down in front of him, and when he looked up at her with gratitude written all over his face, she just smiled and said, "Enjoy, and please take your time. We are not rushing anyone out on a day like this." Standing in front of a gleaming skyscraper, shaking hands with the mayor. But it was definitely him. The same pale blue eyes, the same lined face. "Emma, this donation is for you," Carol said. He sent a letter too. Carol handed her a printed email, and Emma's hands shook as she read it. "To whom it may concern. My name is Robert Chen, and I am writing to you about one of your employees, Emma. I do not know her last name, but she is the young woman who served me this past Tuesday. I came into your cafe that day. At a very low point in my life, I have more money than I could ever spend, and I have built an empire that bears my name. But in the past year, I lost my wife of 47 years, and I discovered that when you have wealth, everyone wants something from you, but very few people see you as a human being. I have been surrounded by people who smile to my face, but I know they only care about what I can give them or what connections I can provide. That day I was tired. Tired of the pretending. Tired of the isolation. Tired of feeling like I did not matter beyond my bank account. So I decided to walk into places where no one knew who I was. I dressed in old clothes, and I wanted to see how people treated me when they thought I had nothing. Your employee Emma treated me with more kindness and dignity than I have experienced in years. She did not just serve me food. She saw me. She spoke to me like I mattered. She paid for my meal out of genuine compassion, not because she wanted anything. In return, in that one interaction, she reminded me that there is still goodness in this world, that there are still people who help others simply because it is the right thing to do. She gave me hope at a time when I desperately needed it. The $50,000 I am transferring to your cafe is a gift specifically for Emma. I understand that may be unusual, but I want her to have it. She can use it however she wishes. Pay off debts, continue her education, take a vacation, or simply have a cushion for the future. I do not need anything in return. I do not want publicity or recognition. I simply want to thank her for seeing me as a person when she had no reason to. Please give her my deepest gratitude. Sincerely, Robert Chen. Emma read the letter 3 times before it started to feel real. Tears streamed down her face and she could not speak. Carol was crying. "To Emma, this is incredible." Carol said, "Do you understand what this means? This could change your life." Emma nodded, but she could barely process it. $50,000. It was more money than she had ever had, more than she had ever dreamed of having. She thought about her student loans that hung over her like a dark cloud. She thought about her mother who needed help with medical bills. She thought about the apartment she shared with 2 roommates and how she had always dreamed of having her own place. She thought about all the nights she had laid awake worrying about money. And then she thought about the old man. Robert sitting at that table by the window, looking so lost and alone, and how all she had done was give him a bowl of soup and treat him with kindness. She had not done it expecting anything. She had done it because it was right. Over the next few days, the story somehow got out and the local news picked it up. Reporters called the cafe, wanting to interview Emma, but she declined. She did not want attention or praise. She just wanted to process what had happened. Carol tried to protect her from the media frenzy, but a few articles were published anyway, calling her the kind waitress and the good Samaritan. Emma hated it because it made her feel like what she had done was extraordinary, when to her it had just been human. About a week after the donation, Emma received another letter, this one delivered by hand to the cafe. It was from Robert Chen, and it was addressed to her personally. Dear Emma, I hope this letter finds you well, and I hope the gift I sent has been helpful to you. I want you to know that it came with no strings attached. You owe me nothing. I am writing to you again because I wanted to explain something that I did not include in my first letter. I wanted you to understand why that day mattered so much to me. For most of my life, I have been driven by ambition. I built my company from nothing, and I worked every day to prove that I was worth something. I measured my value in buildings and bank accounts and business deals. And for a long time, that felt like enough. But when my wife died, I realized that I had spent so much time building an empire that I had forgotten to build real connections. The people around me now are employees, business partners, investors, people who need something from me. I do not blame them. That is the nature of business. But I realized I was desperately lonely. I wanted to know if anyone would care about me, if I was not Robert Chen, the billionaire. What if I was just an old man with nothing? Would anyone notice me? Would anyone care? So I started this experiment. I would go to different places dressed in old clothes with no wallet, no identification, nothing that could give away who I was. And I watched how people treated me. Most people ignored me. Some were rude, a few were kind in a transactional way, giving me directions or holding a door but moving on quickly. But you were different. You did not just help me. You saw me. You talked to me like I mattered. You made sure I had enough to eat, and you refused to let me feel ashamed. You gave me back something I thought I had lost, my sense of worth as a human being, not as a bank account. I am 83 years old. Emma and I do not have many years left. I have no children, and most of my family is gone. I have been thinking a lot about legacy, about what I want to leave behind, and I realize that all the buildings with my name on them mean nothing compared to moments like the one you gave me. So thank you, not just for the soup or the coffee, but for reminding what truly matters. Thank you for your kindness, your compassion, and your humanity. I do not expect to see you again, but I want you to know that you changed my life in ways you cannot imagine. With deepest gratitude, Robert Chen. Emma cried when she read the letter. She folded it carefully and put it in her bag, and she carried it with her for weeks afterward, rereading it whenever she needed to remember why she did what she did. The money changed Emma's life in practical ways. She paid off her student loans, which had been suffocating her for years. She helped her mother with medical bills and made sure she could afford the treatment she needed. She moved into her own small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was hers, and she loved it. She even put some money into savings, something she had never been able to do before. But more than the money, what changed Emma was the reminder that small acts of kindness matter. She had always believed that. But now she had proof. She had proof that seeing people treating them with dignity and compassion could ripple out in ways you could never predict. Emma kept working at the cafe. She could have quit. She could have done something else. But she loved her job, and she loved the people she met there. She continued to treat every customer with the same warmth and attention she had given Robert. She learned their names, remembered their orders, asked about their lives, and she noticed that people responded. They smiled more. They lingered longer. They seemed lighter when they left. A few months later, Emma was working an evening shift when a well-dressed man in his 50s walked into the cafe and approached the counter. He looked familiar, but Emma could not place him. "Are you Emma?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, can I help you?" The man smiled. "I am David Chen, Robert's nephew. He asked me to come by and check on you. He wanted to make sure you were doing okay." Emma's heart jumped. "How is he?" "Is he all right?" David's smile faded a bit. "He is declining." Emma: "The doctors say he does not have much time left, but he is at peace. He talks about you often. He says meeting you was one of the best things that happened to him in his final years." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I wish I could see him again," she said. "I wish I could tell him how much his kindness meant to me." David reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "He wanted me to give you this, and he said if you want to visit him, he would love that. He is at his home in the hills. Can take you there if you would like." Emma did not hesitate. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I would like that very much." 2 days later, David picked Emma up and drove her to Robert's estate. It was a sprawling property with manicured gardens and a view of the entire city. Emma felt out of place as they walked up the long driveway, but David was kind and reassuring. "He is in the sunroom. He said he spends most of his time there now." They entered the house, which was beautiful but somehow sad. Emma could feel the emptiness. In it, the echoes of a life lived mostly alone. David led her through several rooms and finally to a bright sunroom filled with plants and windows that overlooked the gardens. There in a comfortable chair wrapped in a blanket was Robert. He looked even more frail than he had that day in the cafe, but when he saw Emma, his face lit up with a smile that made him look years younger. "Emma," he said, his voice weak but full of warmth. "You came." Emma walked over to him and knelt down beside his chair, taking his hand in hers. "Of course I came," she said. "How are you?" Robert chuckled softly. "I am old and dying, but I am happy. You know why? Because I got to see you again." They talked. For over an hour, Emma told him about how the money had changed her life, about paying off her debts, and helping her mother, and finding her own place. Robert listened with tears in his eyes, nodding and squeezing her hand. "You used it well," he said. "That makes me so happy." Emma told him about the letter he had sent and how she had read it over and over. "You changed my life too." She said, "You reminded me why I do what I do. You reminded me that kindness is never wasted." Robert looked at her with those pale blue eyes and said, "You know, Emma, I spent my whole life trying to build something that would last, trying to make my mark on the world, and in the end, the thing I am most proud of is not a building or a business deal. It is this connection. Real, honest human connection. That is what lasts. That is what matters." Emma stayed until the sun began to set, and the room was filled with golden light. When it was time to go, Robert hugged her tightly. "You are a gift to this world," he whispered. "Never forget that." Emma left that day knowing she would probably never see him again. And she was right. Robert Chen passed away 3 weeks later peacefully in his sleep, at the funeral, which was attended by hundreds of business leaders, politicians, and socialites. David found Emma in the crowd and brought her to the front row. She felt out of place among all the wealth and power, but David insisted, "This is where you belong," he said. "You were one of the most important people in his life." After the service, David handed Emma another envelope. "Uncle Robert left this for you," he said. Inside was a letter and a check. Emma opened the letter first. "Dear Emma, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I am at peace with that. I lived a long life, and in the end I got to experience something truly beautiful. I got to be reminded of the goodness in people because of you. The check I have included is not another gift. It is an investment. I am leaving you enough money to start your own cafe if you want. To a place where you can create the kind of environment you created for me that rainy day. A place where everyone is welcome, where people are treated with dignity and kindness, where connection matters more than money. You do not have to do this. Of course, the money is yours to use however you wish, but I hope you will consider it, because the world needs more places like that, and it needs more people like you. Thank you, Emma, for everything. Your friend." Emma looked at the check and gasped. It was for $500,000. She cried right there in the middle of the funeral, surrounded by strangers, but David put his arm around her and said, "He wanted you to have it. He believed in you." A year later, Emma opened her own cafe. She called Second Cup, a name that represented second chances and the idea that everyone deserves to be seen. She designed it to be warm and welcoming with comfortable chairs and soft lighting, and a policy that no one would ever be turned away for lack of money. She trained her staff to treat every customer with respect and kindness, no matter what they looked like or how much money they had. On the wall near the entrance, Emma hung a framed photo of Robert Chen, not the one in the expensive suit, but a photo David had given her of Robert in his old coat sitting at the table by the window in the original cafe. Below the photo was a small plaque that read, "In memory of Robert Chen, who taught me that true wealth is measured in connection, not currency." The cafe became known as a place where everyone belonged. Students came to study. Elderly people came to chat. Homeless individuals came for a warm meal and were never made to feel unwelcome. Emma made sure of that. She remembered what Robert had shown her, that how you treat people when they have nothing reveals who you truly are. Years passed and Emma's cafe thrived, not because it made a lot of money, but because it created something money could not buy: community connection. Hope. People came not just for the coffee, but for the feeling they got when they walked through the door. The feeling of being seen, of mattering, of belonging. Emma never forgot that rainy Tuesday afternoon when an old man walked into her life and changed everything. She never forgot the lesson he taught her, that kindness is the most valuable currency we have, and that every person we meet is carrying a story we know nothing about. And every time she served someone who looked tired or lost or alone, she thought of Robert, and she made sure they felt what he had felt that day. Welcome, valued, seen, because in the end, that is what we all want: to be seen for who we truly are, to be treated with dignity and kindness, to know that we matter not because of what we have or what we can give, but simply because we are human. And that is a gift that costs nothing but means everything.